Alright, hey guys, what's up? It's Michael here again. Thank you for joining me. First things first, I just have to apologize. I know it's been about a month since I posted my last video. I did mention that I was moving, and that is done. I am now in Texas, and I'm all settled in, and I should be back on a semi-regular schedule. Now, this week, if you couldn't tell from the image here, I will be talking about Rhythm of War, the new Brandon Sanderson book, the new Stormlight Archive novel. I'm going to take the dust jacket off here because it makes the book hard to handle. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the book itself, I just want to say this is the first of the Stormlight hardcovers that I've actually bought. The Way of Kings I have in paperback somewhere on my shelf behind me, and the other two, Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, I read on my Kindle, which is where I read most of my books. But with this one, I wanted to get the hardcover, and I have to say I am very glad I did, and I kind of need to go and buy the hardcovers for the other ones now, because the art that you get in the front or in the end pages it's astounding. It is so gorgeous. I honestly spent probably half an hour before I read the book just staring at the art and trying to get all the little details, because it's gorgeous. The art itself, this stuff along with the black and white illustrations among the pages, are honestly probably worth the price of admission on their own. They are beautiful. Now, on to my actual thoughts about the book itself. Now, the first thing that really stood out to me while reading this book is the degree to which Brandon is involving elements from the rest of the Cosmere. Obviously, in the first three, there were elements that came into play, Azure and Sword Nimi and a couple other things, but it really jumps to a new level in Rhythm of War. There is so much here that you wouldn't have a full understanding of if you hadn't read the rest of the Cosmere. I don't think if you haven't read the rest of the Cosmere that you won't be able to enjoy Rhythm of War, but I do think you'll be left with more unanswered questions than Brandon usually leaves you with. So if that sounds like that's something that would bother you, then you might want to try and read at least Warbreaker and Elantris beforehand, before getting into Rhythm of War, because those two have the most elements that come into play here. None of the questions that you'll be left with in that regard are related to the plot specifically, I wouldn't say. Like I said, I don't think you won't be able to enjoy it, but if you have read the rest of the Cosmere, you will definitely get more out of this book than you would otherwise. Now, as someone who is obsessed with the Cosmere, I absolutely love it. The very concept of it draws me in immediately. I freaking love how much information he gives you in this book. There's pieces of information thrown in the story, but if you understand the context around some of those elements, you get, there's more than just a sentence of information there, despite it really only being a sentence. If that makes sense. If that makes any sense at all, I hope it does. Now, in terms of the characters, this book was really interesting because, for the most part, the main characters from the first three books take a back seat. There's some minor exceptions to that and one major exception, but let me just kind of discuss what I mean by that. So the main characters, specifically mostly Adolin and Shallan, are barely in the book, honestly. And as someone who's a fan of Adolin, I was a little bit disappointed by that, but what he gives you instead is more than makes up for it. Now, Adolin, I don't feel like got a lot to do. What he did get to do is clearly important, but I have a feeling it's going to play more of a role in book 5, or just in the story in the future, because it didn't feel like it had a lot of effect on the narrative in book 4 specifically. It felt like more of a setup for future stories, which is fine. Now, Shallan got about the same amount of screen time as Adolin. That's to say, not much. Now, like I said, I'm a fan of Adolin. I'm really not that much of a fan of Shallan. Her character irritates me. I do not like people who compulsively lie and hide things from people, and that's like her entire freaking character. I know she has her reasons, but it still irritates me and gets on my nerves, so I do not like her, so I didn't exactly miss her having a large amount of screen time. That being said, the screen time she did have was used very effectively, and if you are a fan of Shallan, I think you'll be pleased with the developments in her story in this book. She does make some pretty big steps forward in the small amount of screen time she has. So, like I said, if you're a fan, I think you'll be pleased, if not with the amount of story she has, then at least with the quality of story that she gets here. So, Adolin and Shallan don't get a lot of screen time. Dalinar is a little bit above them. He gets more screen time than Adolin and Shallan, but not nearly as much as he has in the past 3 books, especially, obviously, Oathbringer being his book. The stuff he does is important, and if you're a Dalinar fan, which I am, he's not my favorite character, but I do like Dalinar. I don't think you'll be disappointed in his story. He does some cool things. I will say they have this whole kind of mystery going on around what his powers are as a bondsmith, and I don't I feel like you were teased with near answers in this book, if that's a mystery that you're really kind of like on the edge of your seat for, but you don't get the answers yet, and hopefully they'll come in book 5. I have a feeling they will. I wouldn't say Dalinar's part in this book is the most groundbreaking or astounding or even the most fascinating part. It's not bad, it's not boring, it's well written, and there's lots of exciting parts, but it doesn't stand out above any of the other parts of the story. Now, the last main character is the exception to that rule, Kaladin. Kaladin gets a ton of screen time in this book, and this book actually cemented Kaladin as my absolute favorite Cosmere character, specifically because I relate to his issues and the struggles he goes through with his own mind, fighting his own mind. I can relate to those a lot, like I'm sure a lot of people can. I'm sure that's why he's such a popular character. He gets a lot to do in this book. The journey that Kaladin goes throughout this narrative had me swinging back and forth between weeping and cringing and anxiety and cheering and pumping my fist for his victories. Especially that one near the end, if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. It's absolute pure catharsis, that victory. It's like you just feel your heart racing and you're smiling and you're like, yeah, fuck that guy, get him, Kaladin, and it's like, it's so well written, it's beautiful, and I loved it. Honestly, I really feel like Kaladin finally came into his own as a character. I know people are going to give me flack for saying that he didn't feel like a fully fleshed out character to me in the first 3 books. And that's not even something I would have said until this book. I didn't even realize that he had more room to flesh out until this book, but he did, and it's phenomenal. I'm going to try not to ramble about Kaladin for too long, because I very easily could. I freaking love that character. Now, the side characters that take the spotlight from the old main characters, there's 2 main ones, the first one being Navani. Now, Navani is not a character that I really had a lot of opinions on throughout the first 3 books. She didn't really strike me one way or the other. She was fine, she was there, the things she did were helpful, and she was there to support the main characters for the most part. She really got to become her own character in this book, and I fell in love with her. She is so well written. The insecurity that she has to fight throughout this entire book, the mask of confidence that she puts up, in the lies she tells to herself, and the journey of realizing those lies for what they are and realizing that her accomplishments do make her remarkable, is so well written and so well realized that you feel like you're in the room with Navani. You feel like you're in her head as she's dealing with these thoughts and these struggles. Bravo, Brandon, with Navani. You took a character that was fairly minor and really, really made her fantastic. I can't say enough about his work with her. The other side character that really gets the spotlight in this book is Venli. Now, Venli is a character from the previous books that I really wanted to hate. Just from the way she treated Eshonai, she was petty, she was vindictive. I could not handle the way she treated her sister. I hated it. I love Eshonai as a character. I think she's fantastic. I kind of wish she had more screen time in the series in general. We all know that that's not going to happen. That being said, with Venli, Brandon took a character that I very much wanted to hate and made me sympathize with her and made me fall in love. It's a skill that I think Brandon has that I think a lot of authors would be very envious of. I genuinely think Brandon could take his most evil characters and make them relatable and sympathetic. He could probably even do it with Moshe. Is it Moash? I don't know. I'm going to call him Moshe. He could redeem Moshe if he wanted to. I think he has the skill. I hope he doesn't, because fuck Moshe, but he could. He literally has one of this world's worst war criminals becoming a virtuous, moralistic man in Dalinar. So I think he has the skill to take anybody evil and redeem them. And he really does that with Venli. Her actions in the past books are wrong. She makes the wrong choices in the first 3 books. And you hate her for that, for the choices she made. But then as you're reading it, you find out she hates herself for the choices she made. She hates the choices she made. She regrets them, and she starts taking steps forward to be better in the future and make better choices. And that's honestly, I think, one of the best illustrations of the theme that runs throughout the Stormlight Archive. It's the quote, what is the most important step a man can take? The most important step is always the next one. That is, I think, the main theme of the Stormlight Archive, that regardless of your past, regardless of the sins you've committed, of the shames that you hold within, if you're willing to put in the effort and do your best to be better, there is redemption available for everyone. And I love that. I think that's a beautiful theme. And while it may be more intense with some other characters, I think the clearest illustration of that is Venli's arc throughout Rhythm of War. She really becomes not a hero or a great person or anything, but she starts that journey and becomes better, and you see her become better. And hopefully that continues into book 5 and the rest of the series afterwards. So I don't want to ramble on for too long. Final thoughts here. Like I said, this is probably my favorite Cosmere book at this point, and it is definitely my favorite of the Stormlight books. I fell in love with Rhythm of War. I think Brandon absolutely nailed it. Honestly, I just finished it yesterday, so I might be on a little bit of a high, but I'm leaning towards a 10 out of 10. I didn't really have any major issues with the book. My issues were complaints that a character that I liked wasn't in it enough, but the characters that took his place were fantastic, and I fell in love with them. I want to be a little more stingy with my 10 out of 10s, but I can't think of a single issue I have with this book, and I feel like it's leaps and bounds above the rest of the Cosmere, just in terms of gripping you and dragging you forward, and keeping you involved. I can't give it anything less than a 10 out of 10. I loved it. Brandon did a fantastic job. Sorry, I'm rambling, but it's so freaking good, guys. You have to read it. I can't even put into words how much I loved this book. Anyway, I'm gonna shut down here. Stop rambling. Shut my stupid mouth. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I will try to be back next week with another very special book review. But if I can't get it out next week, then I'll see you next time. So.